Welcome to our new year of In Search of Civility. I am Kelley Packer, and I'll be moderating today's discussion with my special co-host, Quinn Perry, the Idaho School Board Association's Deputy Director and Government Affairs Director. Before we introduce our guests, let me share with you a bit of background on In Search of Civility. The series is an innovative partnership between the Association of Idaho Cities and the Boise Metro Chamber. We started this series in January 2021 and remain committed to discussing the challenges facing our state and communities. In Search of Civility believes in the idea that truth exists and cannot be found without a sincere exchange of ideas. Civility in our discourse, we believe, is necessary for advancement and preservation of relationships, institutions, and society. To agree, one must first disagree well. Listening actively to key stakeholders, giving your political opponents respect, the benefit of the doubt, empathy, and sympathy for their motives is very important. Ultimately, civility gives us the opportunity for our own ideas and notions to change, bringing improvements to our own lives and even society as a whole. We believe civil dialogue can affect great change, which is why we strive to help important conversations take place. These conversations are not possible, however, without the help of our partners. We especially want to thank Holly Troxell Law Firm for sponsoring our show and we have a short video to play for our listeners to learn more about their work here in Boise.
We date our roots back to the 1860s with James Hawley. Although we have a long history, we've also done well to adapt to the future and adapt to what it means to provide legal services today in what is often a high-tech world.
When you have 110 lawyers under one roof practicing together, they help each other out. It's a great value to the client.
The values we're presenting to our clients and to each other, and the way we're conducting ourselves both professionally and personally, makes it a natural fit that we're going to do our best to serve the members of our community.
Thank you, Holly Troxell. We also want to thank our media partners, Idaho Ed News, the Idaho Statesman, the Idaho Press, and the Idaho Capital Sun. They provide us with a platform and audience with whom we can interact. Joining us today are four special guests who work within the local and state policy arena here in Idaho. Quinn, do you mind telling us a bit more about our guests today?
Yes, thank you, Kelley. We have an exciting panel today of state and local government leaders, so let's get introductions started. Our first guest is Senator Doug Ricks. Senator Ricks grew up on a farm in Madison County. From 2018 to 2020, he served as the Idaho House of Representatives for District 34. He now serves as in the Idaho Senate, where he is the chairman of the local government committee. After serving a Polish-speaking LDS mission in Australia, Senator Ricks graduated from Ricks College and later BYU Idaho. At age 25, he left the family farm and opened the first PC computer store in Rexburg in 1987. In 2000, he sold the store and took a job at BYU Idaho, managing all the PCs in the computer labs, where he also provided technical assistance for students with disabilities. As a side business, he flipped houses and managed to weather the real estate bubble. In his free time, he enjoys fishing, hunting, boating, and spending time with his family. He and his wife, Melissa, have been married for 38 years, where they've raised 5 children together and enjoy 4 grandchildren. Welcome, Senator Ricks. Our second guest, who's running a tad bit late, but will be here any moment, is Representative Jason Monks, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce him while he gets settled. Representative Jason Monks has been married to his high school sweetheart, Shelley, for almost 30 years. He and his wife are blessed to have 8 children, 4 of which are adopted, and 7 grandchildren. He's been inspired to serve in public office because he wants to do right by his children and grandchildren and wants them to be able to enjoy Idaho's greatness for years to come. Representative Monks paid his way through high school and supported his wife while attending college, working for a construction company doing exterior stucco. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Health Sciences with a dual emphasis, Environmental Health and Industrial Hygiene, from Brigham Young University. When Representative Monks isn't serving in the legislature, where he serves as the House Revenue and Taxation Committee Chair, or working at one of his 2 businesses, he can often be found coaching his kids' sports teams or serving in his church. Thank you, Representative Monks. Our third guest is Canyon County Commissioner Brad Holton. Commissioner Holton is a lifelong resident of Canyon County, where he's run a local small business for more than 46 years. He has been married to his beautiful wife and best friend Laura for 45 years. Throughout that time, he has raised 2 kids in Greenleaf, where he served as mayor for 27 years, and he is now the proud grandparent of 4 grandchildren. Public service has been a big part of his life and his career. He has been an active member of the Treasure Valley Partnership for the past 18 years, serving as its president in 2022. In addition, as the mayor of Greenleaf, he has acted in small city advocate to the chairman of the Association of Idaho Cities Legislative Committee. In this role, he provided valuable input and guidance on legislative issues impacting municipal government. He has also been a strong proponent of emergency preparedness, working closely with local emergency planning committee, FEMA, and the Department of Homeland Security. During his 25+ years serving as Greenleaf's mayor, he oversaw multiple budgets and gained experience and knowledge in various issues like zoning, legislation, the open meeting law, and more. Additionally, he has worked closely with many governmental agencies such as the EPA, IDEQ, USDA, Southwest District Health, Lower Boise Watershed Council, Army Corps of Engineers, and the Golden Gate Highway District. Welcome, Commissioner Holton. And our final guest today is Twin Falls City Manager Travis Rothweiler. In April 2011, Travis Rothweiler was appointed as the city manager for the city of Twin Falls. Travis served as the assistant city manager for Twin Falls and the city administrator for the city of Jerome. He is recognized as a credentialed manager by the International City Manager Association. Travis earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and a Master's degree in Public Administration from Montana State University, and is a graduate of the University of Virginia's Senior Executive Institute in 2007. He is the recipient of the International City County Management Association for Program Excellence and Innovation in the area of economic development, and was the first local government leader to receive the CEO of Influence by the Idaho Business Review. He and his wife, Amy, have been married since 2003. They are both passionate about endurance sports, including cycling and triathlons. They have 2 boys, David and Jackson, who are 16 and 14, and enjoy traveling across country and internationally watching them play in elite level basketball tournaments. Welcome, Travis. And Kelley, I don't know if you want me to ask the first question or you're good and you're on mute, just so you know.
Thank you. Thanks, Quinn. I apologize for that. And welcome, everybody. I was a little delayed because I'm trying to help Chairman Monks get on. He's having a hard time with the link, but I was just walking him through a couple of things, and I apologize for that. We are excited to have our guests today. And to get started, we're going to ask all of these questions of all of our panelists. And why don't we start with our city and county folks first, and then we'll move to Senator Ricks and end with Representative Monks, hopefully giving him enough time to work through that link issue and get on here. So how about we start with you, Travis, and then go you, Brad, and then move to Chairman Ricks and Chairman Monks. And the question, what I really want you to do with this question is kind of set the stage for our listeners about what growth in Idaho has looked like, especially in your community. What are you seeing, and how has that changed over the last, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, Kelley and Quinn, thank you for the opportunity to be here and kind of highlight and share Twin Falls, and hopefully being able to share the stage with the members of our legislature and friends of the county. We're able to work together to begin dialogues to find common sense solutions moving Idaho forward. Because growth isn't impacting just the city of Twin Falls, it's impacting all of Idaho in every nook and cranny that we have. To put numbers in perspective, the city of Twin Falls has grown from 44,000 people at 2010 to over 56,000 people today, which is the current estimated census. And in the last 3 years, we've grown by nearly 9%, from 51,000 to 56,000. And if that was where our story ended, the level of growth would be something that might be sustainable and moving forward, even though it's approaching, pretty significant numbers. But Twin Falls is the economic hub for a geographic area that contains 275 to 300,000 people. And on a given day, we see our population nearly double. We did some sampling of roads, and every major penetration point into the city of Twin Falls, we saw 80,700 vehicles that came into our community. And so when we look at the city of Twin Falls and the level of growth we're having, all of the communities from Rupert to Filer to Mountain Home to Elko, Nevada, are also seeing significant growth rates. In fact, by percentage, it's greater than probably what we're experiencing. And as a result of that, our daily impact is causing the city of Twin Falls to double on a daily basis. And so it's been very impactful, and we're seeing it continue. And that is obviously leading to traffic congestion. It's leading to housing shortages, increased housing costs. And so we're really trying to make sure that we keep Twin Falls' identity as we continue to see this unprecedented growth, that we continue to be the place that people can remember, that they grew up here, and that we don't take the great amenities that we have for granted.
Thank you very much, Travis. Okay, Commissioner Holton. I believe you're on mute still, Commissioner. At the bottom of the page, you'll find the mute button, and you can.
There we go. All right.
There we go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Well, my story is a little bit divided because I'm a mayor of a small city, a commissioner of the second largest county. So I'll start with the city. So in a 10 to 5 year period looking back, really not much has changed within the city. We've had a few new high-end homes for a residential bedroom community. High-end would be approaching $1 million or over. So that's been somewhat impactful and nice to have. But really, we're in a quote unquote a normal growth period, but we are right at 1,000 people, and it doesn't take very many building permits to be significant. So county-wise, 5 to 10 years back, we were experiencing some growth in the county. Most of the growth would be within the city limits. As short as 5 years back is really when the impact of growth has hit Canyon County. And without exaggeration, last year, 97% of the growth in Canyon County was in the incorporated areas of the city. 3% was out in the county. So the county per se, it hasn't been hit that, but the difference between a city and a county is most of the county services are mandated by the state. They're not optional. And so, as an example, last year, the county gave out $1.1 billion in occupancy permits. That's pretty significant. And out of that, north of 800 million will be taxable. So that will come on the tax rolls, and will adjust and modify the levy rates in some of the areas. But we're experiencing wild growth. I mean, as an example, they've added 3 lanes to the freeway. You would look at that and say, why didn't they add 4? It's just explosive growth. And so that's what we're experiencing.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Chairman Ricks.
Yes, so thank you for this opportunity. Of course, I remember during the COVID time when the legislature was in session, the traffic was not a problem in the Boise area. Everybody was at home, so maybe that's a way to solve the traffic, is to get everybody working from home again. So in my area, I've had Rexburg, Rexburg's had a lot of growth in the last 10 years. We've gone from, in 2010, about 25,400 plus folks to now around 40,500 in just the last 10 years or 12 years. It's grown quite a bit. Madison County and has grown likewise outside the city limits too. And I think we have close to 45 or 50,000 folks in, including Rexburg, but in county-wide. And I think on the census numbers, it showed Madison County is the fastest growing percentage-wise in the last 10 years. Of course, we know a lot of that's attributed to the growth and change of BYU Idaho and going from a 2-year university to 4-year and increasing their enrollment. Just the students alone at BYU Idaho, it's over 20,000 that they bring to the area every year. And so it's a lot of growth, we have a lot of apartments, a lot of cars on the roads. It has caused some interesting scenarios for the city. And likewise with BYU Idaho, of course, it's a university, it's exempt from property tax. We also have a local owned, county owned hospital that's exempt from property tax too. And so within the city limits of Rexburg, 58% of the property is tax exempt, which also puts additional pressure on our citizens paying property taxes.
Thank you, Chairman Ricks. And my apologies to Chairman Monks. We were texting this morning and my fat thumb hit 12:45 instead of 11:45, and I apologize for him. So I'm the reason he is delayed, and then we had problems with getting a link to him, and I apologize to you. But we're just setting the stage for our conversation on what kind of growth your community has seen, especially over the last 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Kelley, and part of that I'll take the responsibility for as well. I should have verified with you that it was 12:45 because I had 11:45 originally, but I was out bucking some hay, so I had to get at least blown off a little bit so I could come in and get on the call there for you. My experience here in the Treasure Valley is over the last 30 years when I moved into Meridian. I believe I remember seeing a sign that had just shy of 10,000 people living in Meridian. And now obviously Meridian's one of the largest cities in the state. And so that's been a challenge. I think it was pretty slow, steady growth up until the last, 5 years. We're no different than anybody else. We've seen that explosive growth. I was just talking to a developer and he has a plan for a 1,500 unit, development here in my district. And I thought my district's pretty well built out. I'm not sure where they're going to put that, but over by one of the golf courses, they're going to put another development. And that alone it's a small community there. And that's no different than any other part of the Treasure Valley. It's just growth everywhere. And traffic just seems like there's no way to keep up with that. You hear that from everybody. It's like, why don't they build more roads? And we have the same challenge everybody else does. Money is always a challenge, but realistically on road construction, it's a matter of labor, just trying to get contractors to be able to build them as well. So we're struggling with the same challenges I think everybody else is, or at least some of the same challenges, I should say. Our challenges are different than the smaller communities. I understand that, for Meridian to add 1,000 people, that's okay. It's a big deal, but it's not as big deal as a city with 500 people that adds another 500 or even a 100. So growth is affecting all of us, and I don't know when it's going to stop. I kept thinking it was going to slow down, but obviously it hasn't yet.
Awesome. Thank you so much for setting the stage on that question. Our next question is kind of targeted at the local government folks. So Commissioner Holton, I'm actually going to have you answer the question first. And the question is, what kind of demands has growth put on local infrastructure needs at the city and county level?
Sorry about that. As before, I'll start out with the city and move to the county. So for our specific city, we have a limited number of available buildable lots. So that means that our growth is pretty maintained and somewhat in control. But if just one subdivision that's looking at coming into Greenleaf, we would have to annex and bring it in. That will put us upside down financially within the first year that they start selling lots, because 8% of $95,000 general budget is chump change. So for the 23 fiscal year, it was 2.1 million in building permit value. In 2024, it looks like it's going to be $2.4 million in buildable permits before we go over the 8%. So we have some thinking to do, and we have some choices to be made, because once you go above the 8%, all of those new houses will not contribute to the cost that they burden the city. And so our quality of life for the existing city patrons will go down, period. Road improvements is probably our current biggest problem, and how to fix roads and how to maintain them. With the price of oil, that changes the price of crude, it changes the price of asphalt, and it just gets to be a snowball effect on how to deal with it. On the other hand, for county services, most, if not many, are state mandated. They're not optional. And so most of them require property taxes to fund the service. Public safety, such as the sheriff, the jail, the courts, all of the documentation that goes with the courts, probation services, juvenile justice service, and jail. Property value appraisals, that's a big thing. Tax assessments, tax collection and distribution. We have 66 political subdivisions that operate within Canyon County borders, and we distribute those tax receipts to all of those. The recordings that the clerk does, the elections, driver's licenses, vehicles licenses, the list goes on of what the county does. And growth directly impacts these services, and the funding for those never catches up to the actual expenses. Meanwhile, the property taxes are the only stopgap to provide these mandated services. The pay-to-play services, we try to maintain balanced budgets, and you're always behind, but at least you can try to maintain that gap. But with the explosive growth, we're really lagging on funding at the county. And the county's incoming revenues are from many sources. People just think that it's property tax. For Canyon County, it's a little over a third of our total revenue income on our total budget is from property taxes. And so property taxes are generally the one that's called on to fill the gap, to stop it up. And we had great intentions last year to reduce our it was a $54 million general budget, and they reduced it $14 million. And along came two of these House bills. And now to get back to the fixed costs that we had last year, back to $54 million expense this year, we're going to have to borrow from ourselves, and that will end quickly because the reserves are not there. So good intentions on trying to lower the property taxes for 1 year has caught us in Canyon County, and we're going to be paying the piper in the years to come because of the limitations that have been set before us. They're unsustainable. So we're doing the best we can, but we're going to need to have legislative relief.
Awesome, thank you. Travis, I'm going to move to you next from a city manager perspective.
Yep.
What demands have growth put on local infrastructure needs at the city level in Twin Falls?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate, I don't know if I refer to you as mayor or commissioner, so I'll refer to you as Mr. Holton's comments. I can't imagine the juggling act of wearing both those hats. So for us, obviously the exact same challenges. You're looking at the roadway construction. You want to make sure that the asphalt that we have down is in good repair. As we continue to grow and expand subdivisions, that's taking on additional responsibilities. And while we have impact fees. The impact fees that we assess do not cover the costs associated with those true infrastructure components. And if we did, we would create other problems. If you assessed an impact fee that really covered the cost, we would shut down the housing market because you couldn't afford that impact fee. I think the thing that concerns us probably the most is that human capital infrastructure. Really, when we start looking at the city of Twin Falls being a community of nearly 56,000 people, right now we have 83 sworn police officers. We have 103 in the total department. We have 83 sworn police officers. And if you believe ratios and you believe statistics and you say that, one officer per 1,000, north of that is good for individuals served. And we're sitting at about 1.6 based upon our population. But like I shared earlier, we know that our community population grows much larger than on a daily basis than what are the normal people who reside here. And our officer count per 1,000 drops to 0.83. And so if you follow those same level of statistics, you would say that's not a level that provides for community safety. That's not a level that ensures officer safety. As we continue to grow, we're having to build fire stations. Building that critical infrastructure is either something that you save for or something that you bond for. And in both of those cases, it's necessary. As the city of Twin Falls continues to grow, we have to build more fire stations to ensure that we maintain our ISO rating so that we're able to maintain a response rating, so we're able to ensure public safety. Like many government entities, it is our commitment to offer the highest level of services that we can. We want our community to be the most livable place on earth. And we have to find ways to get incredibly creative with our resources. Like Mr. Holton, our property taxes are about 30% of our entire budget, and we're a full service city. And being able to continue to drive that moving forward is important. On an annual basis, we're guaranteed to be able to take 3%, and based on our taxes, that's right around $800,000 a year. And over the course of the last couple of years, we watched the municipal cost index grow by nearly 30%. And so as our costs continue to go, we're no different than any other entity. Inflation has really taken a bite out of new dollars and new resources as we continue to fight and compete for labor, as we continue to fight and compete to make sure that our roadways continue to be acceptable to ensure commerce continues to move forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. I'm going to move to our legislative representative. So actually, Chairman Monks, I'm going to push it to you next. The question again is, what kinds of demands has growth put on local infrastructure needs at the city and county level?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question for you, but I don't think it's my perspective is much different than mayor or the commissioner, either of them. Growth is definitely a challenge, and it's creating issues. I've told this. I'll give you maybe not a story, but an analogy really that Meridian's dealt with. They had a reserve of some money that they were collecting that they wanted to use for various projects, and one of them was looking to do an overpass on Linder that they wanted to do, and in order to do that, they worked with ITD and ACHD trying to get this thing addressed. And one of the options they were going to do was going to use this reserve of roughly $20 million that they had for that project. Now, you can look at that and say that's good governance. They saved money for a project. If you are an old-time Meridianite and you've been here for years and you thought, this is for new development, new growth, and yet you've overtaxed the existing residents to pay for a future project. Now, whether that's a fire station or whether that's a police station, by collecting more money up front, you're getting it from the people who've been here as opposed to the people who are moving in, who are creating that new need. I don't know what the solution is on that. I don't have one either. And I wish I did, but I keep that in the back of my mind that, either you try to put it on the front end, and sometimes the people who didn't create the problem are the ones paying for it, as opposed to putting it on the back end and letting them pay for it. And that has its own challenges, as you guys know, as far as how to get that additional revenue from, just the new people. I think if from a legislative standpoint, we could figure out how to just tax the people moving across the border as a toll tax, maybe that would be great. That would probably be the one that made most, Idahoans the happiest. But I don't know how to do that. And so I think that's one of the challenges. And I don't know if Kelley, I don't know if I'm spilling beans on this or if I shouldn't. But I know we're working with Kelley and trying to come up with new tools that are available for locals to be able to cover these infrastructure needs. Because the real, whether it's just taking care of the existing things that you have right now, or if it's to provide for future development, the needs are real there. And I think that's something that we definitely need to look at. If the tools that you have in your arsenal are not sufficient, then let's figure out what we can do to improve upon those. I think that's something that we, at least from a legislative standpoint, we're happy to look at.
Awesome. Thank you. Senator Ricks, Chairman Ricks, anything else to add?
Yeah, I can add a little bit there. So when you look at the growth that's happening within cities primarily, and growth should not require everybody else to pay a little extra. And that's some of the issues that I guess that has frustrated me. Theoretically, you would have economies of scale where you add additional homes and whatnot. It really shouldn't increase the burden of taxes upon everybody else. But for some reason, what I've been reading the last about the last year, and this is a trend nationwide, that it seems like more in your high density areas, when you add new homes into it, it actually increases taxes for everybody because of the infrastructure and everything else. And I don't know if there's a way to change that paradigm and change that scenario, but nobody minds the growth. But if it costs me more in my taxes for a new housing division to come in, then it's frustrating, and it frustrates a lot of the homeowners. So we as legislators hear a lot from lately, especially because of the tax shifting that's gone on, the values of homes. But we hear a lot from our property taxpayers, and they don't want those taxes to go up anymore. And so it does create some problems. And that's kind of a tax shift. That's another discussion too, whether we address that or not. But yeah, it's frustrating. And like I mentioned, Rexburg, 58% of our property is tax exempt anyway. And so we do pay a higher levy rate for city and county than our surrounding neighbors. And we do feel that. So it's, I don't know what the solution is on that either, but I would hope that the economies of scales, and if technology and other things can be used to make it so you don't have to increase, especially the labor and other things, that you can do more with less resources.
Thank you, all of you, for your answers. I really appreciate it. I'm going to kind of set a stage here again, a little bit about property taxes, and hopefully that'll lead into our next question appropriately. There's a couple of comments that have been made about, how to relieve the pressure on property taxes, right? Because you as legislators do probably, well, I know you do, because I sat in your seats. I know you get calls from people concerned about their property taxes, right? As do the cities to a certain extent, depending on what's going on. And I'm sure the schools do as well, with Quinn being representing them. And I think the real problem, at least from my perspective, is not that locals are frivolously spending, but that the people have to pay those twice a year, right? In a big lump sum. And I think that hurts, that sticker shock is what hurts people the most, because if you really take the bill that they get twice a year and you divide that by the number of days in that that time period, in that 6-month time period. I've done this exercise with some of my family members, and let's say you have a $1,300 tax bill for the year after the homeowner's exemption, right, that comes out. That's divided by 2, that's $650 every 6 months, the 20th of June, the 20th of December. But if I divide that by the 187 days or the 188 days, depending on which slot you're in, it boils down to about, what, $2 a day. And people pay that in sales tax every day without a problem. And they pay it from in their paycheck, their income tax, without ever even feeling it, because it comes out without them seeing it, right? It's relative. And so I really believe it's the sticker shock that hurts the most. And especially if you're an older person and on a fixed income, or a disabled person and on a fixed income, right? If they were able, one of the things I think that would be helpful, and I've talked to the counties about this recently, Seth and Sarah there, about possibly bringing this idea to this session, is if they could pay it monthly. Most wouldn't have to, and if it's in an escrow, they wouldn't even think about it. And those aren't the ones complaining. It's the ones that are on fixed income and disabled or older, right? And their house is paid off and they're having to come up with that twice a year. So if they could pay it monthly, which can happen at the county level, because the clerk already does, or the treasurer's office already does that for people that get behind on their bill. They make a monthly payment plan to get them caught back up. It would not be quite as painful. They could choose if they want to do it quarterly, monthly, every 6 months, like they currently do, depending on their escrow, et cetera. So they wouldn't have to have it messed up. That's one suggestion. So I do think it's the sticker shock. But the other thing I'd like to just put out here quickly for all of us to consider as we talk about the next couple of questions is the state and the locals rely on each other. The state has done a phenomenal job, especially the last few years, in increasing some of the investments. And I want to thank both of you, Chairman Ricks and Chairman Monks, for that. It has helped, dramatically helped with some of our water and sewer needs and or road needs. And unfortunately, it's a drop in the bucket, but it still has helped move the needle that we'd been even farther behind without it. So thank you so, so much. And we do share in some of the sales tax revenue and liquor tax as some replacement dollars for some other things that were taken in past years. But the long and the short of it is, while the state's had a lot of surplus in the sales tax and income tax arena and has been making, pulling that back a little bit and making some modifications to that, the one thing I'd really like us to remember is that the property taxes, which folks complain about, is what's making the investments at the local level, whether in the city limits, most of it within probably a city footprint, or the county. And that's what attracts and retains businesses, which is what feeds the income tax that the state gets and the sales tax that's available for consumers to spend, right? So if we lose, if our infrastructure starts deteriorating to a significant amount and we start losing business, we stand to possibly lose that income and sales tax for the state as well. And so just recognizing that we're in it together and need to partner together to make thoughtful solutions is really important. And so given those two components, I'm going to start with Senator Ricks and then go to Representative Monks, and then we'll go to Commissioner Holton and end with you, Travis, if you don't mind. Given that understanding, those two things, how do you state legislators view property taxes, and then the electeds, how do you view them? I know that they're different hats, but because the legislature regulates that arena and then the locals live within it, let's have a little discussion as quickly as we can, because I know we're down to about 20 minutes and we've got a couple more questions about kind of that view of the property tax policy arena.
Okay, I guess I better unmute. So Kelley, can you just briefly summarize the two questions? You talked about a lot of
So, the fact that, it's probably sticker shock to a certain degree, right? Because of how it's paid, one. And then two, that the investments at the local level really drives the rate of return that you guys all get at the state level to function, right? They are closely tied. What are still some of your would you think at the view of the legislature when it comes to property taxes, knowing you're the ones that actually regulate that footprint?
Yeah. So as far as the paying the property taxes, and I know on a scale compared to a lot of our neighboring states, Idaho's property taxes are not super high compared to many of the others. It's just because of the values of homes have gone way up. There's been a shift of who pays the majority of those property taxes, and so many homeowners, as we know, their property taxes may have doubled in the last couple of years. So it is a sticker shock to them. So that is a concern. That's that shifting that goes on, whether we address that or not, or whether that's a fair thing because the value has gone up in the homes. Is it their responsibility to pay more of that share versus the business community, or should we go to an average or whatever? So that is discussion, but I do believe, I know in my county, you can pay your taxes on a monthly basis. You can do it paid in escrow. And I don't know if that's a function of the software that the county uses or not, but our county does allow that. I think Bonneville County does as well. You can pay in installments rather than just twice a year or once a year if you prefer. So that is an advantage if people will do that in escrow. Of course, if your house has a mortgage, that's collected on a monthly basis anyway. But as far as the investment into the locals, the cities, that's the part I guess I don't know a lot of the numbers per se. Obviously, the city needs to look decent and have enough services in order to attract businesses. But there's got to be a balance, I guess, is probably the key word that I can think of here, is figuring out what that balance is. And as far as having our locals have a little bit of extra money for that, I don't know. My view on services, that government really should provide essential services. There's and essential is sometimes different viewpoints on that, but I really think that we should provide the core essential services of government, and then not a lot of extra that goes up above that, just to help keep taxes down for everybody, and let businesses, let others champion some of those things that help some of the additional growth as well, which some do. Some businesses participate and invest and bring different types of businesses in. And so it's a balance. I know the city has to play a part of that too and provide some of the infrastructure services. So it's a discussion. I don't know if there's ever a complete answer on it, but it's always a discussion and a debate.
Thank you, Senator. Representative.
Thank you. I think your Senator Ricks hit the nail on the head there as far as why there's such a discussion on property tax. 5-10 years ago, we didn't have these discussions because Idaho was always a very low property tax state, and still is today. If you look at our rate compared to not just the surrounding states, but across the nation, we're still a very low property tax. The problem is that it increased so dramatically in such a short period of time that a number of people saw their property taxes more than double in just a matter of years. And so that's where the focus is, and that's what we're hearing from our constituents, and that's where they're wanting us to address it. As far as we do have a symbiotic relationship there without this, the counties providing some of the services that the state does, or the cities providing places or locations for people to live. We wouldn't have any kind of revenue coming in at the state. Interestingly enough, I did a bit of work on the sales tax distribution rate a number of years ago that went to the cities, and historically it was kind of surprising to me to learn where that came from, and that was an attempt at the time to get rid of personal property tax that people were paying at their homes back in the 60s. You'd pay for every tree that you had out there, you paid a property tax, and every cow and pig. And I love to use the silverware example because I thought that was interesting. But we were supposed to replace that with the sales tax. numbers. And to an extent, that's where we have the distribution formula and such. So there is that relationship. I definitely recognize that. Kelley, and I had to go back to my phone to see my notes that I was writing down as you were talking there. So you asked also our view of property tax. Not a secret. I tell people this. I would love to get rid of all property tax. I hate it. I think it should go away, with a big but. But if we're going to do that, we have to replace the money with something else. So I'm cognitive of the fact that you can't just get rid of it and say, oh, well, deal with it. That's not the solution. And I've never said that was the solution. But it was a matter of how do we do that? And if we can't get rid of it, I'd love to lower it as much as we can. And I think last year's bill was an attempt to do that without trying to put any additional burdens on the locals, by just putting more dollars into that system is what we came up with is the bulk of that. And frankly, I would like to see us do more as we continue to go on. No offense to the schools. This is not a dig at the schools at all, but I would love to get rid of their ability to bond and levy. With a big but, if we do that, we have to replace the money with something else. It's not something you just get rid of and say, we'll deal with it. That's not the intent. But I can't do that without providing more funding for them for their buildings. And that's a big thing for me. I'd love to be able to do that. So I don't like income tax either. So it's not just a property tax thing. I would love to have a national sales tax that's high enough that it pays for all of our services and we don't pay income tax either. So I would love to do that. I will make a quick comment. I did see somebody texted in there and they said, why don't you lower the rate to 4% and let the locals do out local option and go from there. I've discussed that many times, and that works great in some communities. But if you're in a community that has no retail in your community, that will not work. They don't have the ability to do that. And I'm a real leery of local option taxes, because I think it can be very detrimental to some communities. If you are the only community in a wide area, you're right. Everybody's going to go to your Albertsons or your Fred Meyers or whatever it is to get their stuff. But if you're in a community like the Treasure Valley and we have different local option taxes within the community, you'll see some areas thrive and some areas will really suffer. And then so you talk about doing a geographical area that gets to determine it. So countywide or something. Well, then what I've done is I've allowed Boise to dictate what CUNA's property or sales tax will be, because they'll outvote them on anything. So these are my struggles with local option. I'm not saying that they're not insurmountable. I struggle with that because I see either a Boise dictating to Meridian and to CUNA what their sales tax will be, and if you allow it by just cities, then I will see if CUNA raises theirs higher than Meridian, then everybody's going to go to Meridian. They're not going to go to CUNA. People will drive to Ontario because they think that there's no sales tax there, and they'll pay $10 in gas to save $5 in sales tax, but they do it. And that's what will happen within the Treasure Valley if we do that. At least that's my fear. And so that scares me, I guess. And so I hate property tax. I do recognize that it's extremely low. You get a great value here in Idaho. I'd love to lower it some more, just because I like people to be able to own their property outright without having to continue to make payments on it. So there's some of those are the challenges. And so when we looked at solutions last year, and we will continue to look at solutions, one of the solutions that, or at least one of the aspects of a solution that I like is not shifting it to somebody else. And that means we're going to have to supplement it some other way, or remove the burden from, the counties. If we're going to take away all of your court related services that you're doing, and we do them, okay, fine. And if we're not, then we, give you the money necessary to do that. And so I think the solution lies in trying to, at least my solution lies in addressing all those little caveats that I have out there. And again, I don't have all those solutions, those answers, but I think together we do better when we come up with them.
Agreed. I appreciate you always being willing to talk through it. Thank you. Commissioner.
Well, I'm going to start into this, that this is not directly against Rep Representative Monks or Senator Ricks. This is a big problem, and this is bigger than the two individuals. And I really appreciate their spirit of cooperativeness that I find lacking in some of the others. So bottom line, I hate property taxes. I find that they're unfair and unequitable. I'm frustrated that the leadership of the legislature communicates to our citizens that they're not in the property tax business. I find that totally disingenuous. In fact, if they're not in the business, then repeal tomorrow House Bill 389 and House Bill 292. They were sold to the public as to what the speaker calls as the locals. It was to help property tax homeowners with exemptions. It did that, and 292 will likely do that, but it's going to be a bumpy road to get there this winter, because I predict that we won't even be able to have our property tax assessments out by the time that we need to be having them pay the bills in December. It is going to be an absolute circus. And that's frustrating. That means that, again, the Idaho legislature passed a bill that they didn't know the inner workings of it and what it really means. For Canyon County, we this year in the budget had to hire 3 full-time plus 1 part-time person to help in the treasurer's and assessor's office for 292. I don't know what the other counties are doing. I've told that there's 17 counties in the state that are able to do their property taxes, and the state tax commission helps them do that. It's going to be an interesting thing how this is going to end up for us. But that said, the legislature's trying, and so you can't shoot the messenger just because they're trying to do that. So for Canyon County, our properties, we were offered the $125,000 circuit breaker. We did the math. It would have needed to have been 286. It's close, but no cigar. That directly affects the members of our community who can least afford it the most. Property taxes went severely off the rail when we lost the index, and no, the legislature didn't know this ahead, but we just had explosive growth, which just blew up the whole problem. And so we've shifted from residential, we've shifted all of this to residential, and it's taken it away from the industrial, commercial, and ag. And I like ag. I want to give them every break I can. But we have commercial and industrial properties in Canyon County today that are paying less than a third of what they were in 2016. Same buildings, same stores, same brick and mortar, and all of those millions of dollars have shifted to our residential property. And sure, it's a formula, but it could be solved. It's a legislative formula. And we have residents today. I've looked at the numbers in the assessor's office, 3 to 4, and there were a couple that were 5 times the amount of property taxes for the same old house that was built in the 70s that they're paying today in property taxes. This year, it's gone down a little. Hopefully, it can start self-correcting. But it's a legislative problem that we need to get together and work on and try to get it solved. This is way bigger than the locals. This is way bigger than budgets. At this kind of shift, you could lower your actual budget and still have those residential properties have to end up paying a larger bill than they did last year because of the shift. I know it's sold to us all the time that it's budget divided into taxable properties. But when you have a shift, that formula is no longer true. That shift is insidious, and it's tough. And it's tough on our people that can least afford it. Said it once, I say it again. I'm willing to sit down and work. We have outstanding people in some of these communities who know this upside down and sideways. I know of people in the state tax commission that would be more than willing to help the legislature. But somehow, these property tax bills, 389 had 48 hours to have publicity before the vote. 292 eliminated all of the other bills that were similar. We got to stop shoving stuff through that has such egregious errors in it and try to get something that's going to really work. Do it out in the open. It probably will take several years to do. And let's start getting to a better place than we are today. Because I'll tell you, 389 is a defund the police and defund the fire and defund your general fund in all of our municipalities. And sooner or later, it's going to start showing up in the counties, and you will end up having to do something, or government, both local and city, as we know it, will not be the same that it is today. And so I'm willing to do what I can. And again, this is not against the senator here and the representative. This is a big problem. We've got into it over years, and we need to start digging our way out of it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Travis, I'll give you a couple minutes, and then we're going to skip a couple questions because we're coming close to our time. We'll have Quinn, after Travis's comments on this, wrap us up with our last question instead of the other two that we had planned. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And so I won't belabor the point. And what I would say is that I think cities and counties would like a seat at the table to be able to engage in a partnership and a meaningful conversation. I appreciate the concern. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No.
And I think that we might even have some information that would alleviate, some of Representative Monk's concerns about people shifting and driving to different places based upon the work that we did with the Woodbury Corporation, a significant property owner, and the work that they do in Utah with their properties, and whether or not local option tax causes a shift. With some real numbers for the city of Twin Falls, in 2019, we collected a total of $22 million in property taxes. And in that, 61% of that was paid by residents, and 39% was paid by commercial and other properties. Fast forward to 2021, where we collected over $24 million in property taxes. The residential share grew to 65%. And the commercial properties actually paid $100,000 less net property taxes than what they did in 2019. So that entire shift went to the residential piece. And it's kind of like what Mr. Holton said. It's because of the rate of growth that the different properties in the different categories saw. Where inside of the city of Twin Falls, we watched a median home grow from $112,000 a decade ago to now nearly $400,000 today. Commercial properties have not appreciated at that same level of time, at that same rate. And so without indexing, we see that shift. I appreciate the works that Representative Monks did on the revenue sharing and the redistribution and what that looked like. Initially, the city of Twin Falls was one of the 11 cities that was a loser because we were receiving more per capita than what we should have. This year, we're starting to see a little bit more. And even at getting nearly $6 million, we still remit nearly $95 million in sales tax back. We recognize that it's important to be able to help drive local schools and local economy. I think that the work that they did to pay down bonds was a good step in the right direction. And I'm hoping that we could use local option sales tax, something as an option for other communities. I've always been a subscriber of local control. And I believe that if you allow a local entity to really choose its own destiny, they are able to help create the community that they want to live in. I don't know if a local option sales tax would be approved inside of the city of Twin Falls. I have suspicion to believe that if we are able to reduce property taxes by using 50% of that collection, which we estimate to be nearly $8 million a year, I think our citizens would be supportive of that. And if we could offer property tax relief as a part of a local option sales tax, I think that would be important. The challenge that I have, and being a subscriber to local control, I can't even legally ask the question because I'm greater than 10,000 persons. And because I can't ask the question, I don't know what the citizens of the city of Twin Falls would do. We would just like to engage in thoughtful conversation that allows our citizens to help create their future that they want to live under.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. And briefly, I think this last question is really important in the context of civility and working together to tackle tough issues. So I'm going to start with Senator Ricks. What do you think would be beneficial for all parties to better understand as conversations regarding property tax policy continue at both the state and local level? So I'm going to start with you, Senator Ricks, move to Representative Monks, and back down to our local government folks.
Yeah, so I do think it's important to sit down and have discussions and hear from our local counterparts. Appreciate Commissioner and City Manager here discussing these things, but having more discussions and getting more information and data is critical and helpful in creating the legislation if there's changes come forth. But certainly we would like to hear from our counterparts in the cities and the counties at the table as well on these discussions.
Awesome. Thank you. Chairman Monks. And I'll repeat the question again while you unmute yourself, which is, what do you think would be beneficial for all parties to understand as you tackle these issues? You're still on mute. So sorry.
Jason, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you. I think that there's different perspectives out there. There is an individual in Doug Rick's area who calls me constantly and wants me to get rid of the homeowner's exemption. And he thinks that's unconstitutional, and he's got all his reasons that, how come the renters don't get this benefit. A lot of the ag community wants to get rid of the homeowner's exemption. In fact, that's one of the things from the Farm Bureau. They specifically want to get rid of that. So I think it's important for us to understand that, what one of us sees as the solution, there's a significant, or there's other people who view it as the problem. And that's what we deal with. We deal with the problem, what works in Greenleaf or doesn't work in Greenleaf may or may not work in Meridian. And that's always the challenge that we have. If all I had to do from a state standpoint was to deal with Meridian or Kuna or even Boise or just the Treasure Valley, heck, I'd take the whole Treasure Valley, easy peasy, relatively speaking. But the problem is those solutions don't always work elsewhere. And so, when I see a problem out in Greenleaf, which, that came up several times during last discussion, and we actually didn't quite get that problem fixed there for you, but I'm optimistic we can in next year. But those solutions that look so simple to me don't work for up north, over in this, south, east, the west. And that's what's a challenge for us from a legislative standpoint, that maybe, and I'm sure my locals understand that, but it's different.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Commissioner. Oh, Kelley, did you want to add something? Okay. I'm going to go to Commissioner Holton and then to Travis briefly. What do you think would be beneficial for all parties to better understand as these conversations regarding property tax continue at the state and local level?
Well, I'm going to try to say this as generously as I can, but I got 29 years in this game, and this is the worst it's ever been. And I say stop producing the one property bill for this year that you either vote on or you're the dirt bag of your district that you're here representing. That is missing the mark and harming the state. We have county treasurers, clerks, all of these people who are able to help us produce much better, stay within the time frames of the tax law, and not mess it up and cause false emergencies from new legislation that didn't even take into consideration what the law of the land is on how property taxes are generated. I guess the question I have is the legislature able to carry this process in an open manner? I mean, the joke that Senator Rice did, we still don't have any of the minutes of those last meetings that they were trying to get together and figure this out. Why is it so secretive? This is a huge problem. And Representative Monks, you're right on. What works for Greenleaf doesn't work for Meridian, doesn't work for Boise. It's a complicated issue. We have 44 counties and there's very few of them that are similar. They're either geographically huge and hardly any people in it. They're all different. Everybody gets to choose whether they live in a city or not. Nobody gets to choose whether they're in a county. You're automatic. And so the 389 and the 292 type House bills, I find them pathetic and need to be removed. We could spend more than 2 hours just on the nuances within each of those two bills, and we don't have the time. And people, the public, aren't even aware of it. And some of the stuff is awful. So I think that we need to get together. We need to start solving the problem. And I believe people just like the representative and the senator we have here today are great people that are going to be willing to carry this and go forward with it. But it's a big thing right now. For whatever reason, the legislature, from my point of view, is very top down, very anti-city, and they've already become almost anti-county. Who do you have left in the whole state? Everybody's in a county. And so we should stop being adversarial and roll up our sleeves and start trying to solve this. Idaho's too great a place to mess up. We need to get back to good law, good statutes that are as fair as we can make them, and get back to work. And I appreciate this opportunity to be on this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis, any final remarks?
Yeah, I can appreciate the conversation because I too hate property taxes, and I hate when they're paid, right? Like 4 days before Christmas. It always sends that not quite the holiday spirit message that I want to have moving forward. But I really subscribe to the belief that reasonable people with a common interest can sit down and find reasonable solutions. And I believe that there are reasonable people in the legislature. I believe that there are reasonable people that are working at the local government level. At the end of the day, we all want the same outcome. We want to have Idaho be the most livable place. It's a place that we want to raise our families. We want to raise, hopefully, I have, like I said, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old. So grandkids for me are hopefully a long ways away, right? But we want to be able to have this be our home. And we want it to be able to be those places that we also grew up in. Yeah. And I think that we have great partners at the legislature. I think what I hear Mr. Holton saying is just a plea to be welcomed to the table, to engage in a conversation where cities may have some ideas and maybe our ideas don't work. And I know that members of the legislature have ideas and maybe their ideas will work as well. But finding a way to work collaboratively to keep Idaho great is what I would hope that we can continue to move forward with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I can say from personal experience, having sat in both seats, both as a city council member of my small community in Southeast Idaho, as well as a legislator with both of these great gentlemen, each area, each elected official, and I'm sure it's the same at the school level, that's elected to do a job and take care of a jurisdiction, whatever that might look like, is truly trying their best to find the right solutions to some really hard problems. I know that every single one of you get calls to manage and handle a responsibility that's not easy. And as has been mentioned here by everyone, every single one of you mentioned how hard it is to find the right solution for this particular problem. And it's one of many. And so I want to thank all four of you for the work that you do in your elected positions and the service that you provide your communities and the state. I know it's not easy, and I know that each one of you are great men that work hard to do what's right. I don't think anybody can refute that, so thank you. And thank you so much for being part of this show. Senator Ricks and Representative Monks, Commissioner Holton, and Travis Rothweiler, thank you so much for joining us for this important discussion today. And to everyone that tuned in, we would also like to thank the Association of Idaho Cities and the Boise Metro Chamber, along with our media partners, Idaho Ed News, the Idaho Statesman, the Idaho Press, and Capital Sun, and our incredible presenting sponsor, Holly Troxel. Please join us again next month during your lunch hour on October 16th for our final podcast of the year, where we'll be discussing the potential impacts of changes to local elections. We look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.